The Boston Red Sox were one of baseball's worst teams in last year's shortened season. But in 2021, they've climbed the ladder all the way up to the American League Championship Series and a 2-1 series lead against the Houston Astros. They managed to survive baseball's strongest division and knock out 2 AL East rivals in the playoffs en route to another shot at a pennant, what would be their 15th in franchise history. They've just beaten the Astros into oblivion in Game 3 and look like they're about to steamroll their way back into the World Series. Wait a second. You thought this video was about the Boston Red Sox?
I was acting.
Because it's not. It's Tuesday. I wake up at 3 a.m. I can't fall back asleep. I usually have this issue, but it's especially bad today. In a few hours, I'm heading out to do one of the coolest things I've ever done, and it's hard for me to really think about anything else. I rush to the gym, I come back home, and I try again. It's now 10:30. My dad and I pack up the car and venture off on a 4.5-hour drive to Massachusetts. I was spending time during the drive thinking about my beginnings on YouTube and how I got here. I feel it's appropriate to reflect a little before we get to where we're going. Flash forward a few hours to around 5 p.m. We get out of the car, now almost 200 miles away from the bedroom where I recorded my first YouTube video. In the parking lot to meet and escort us inside was a representative from Major League Baseball. My dad and I are at Fenway Park for Game 4 of the American League Championship Series. Growing up in Boston, my grandfather was a Red Sox fan, so by association, his son, my dad, in case you need a refresher on how family works, was a Sox fan too. Dad grew up in New York though, so he grew up to be a half Mets fan, half Red Sox fan. I haven't asked him, but I doubt he had any Yankee fan friends growing up. If you look one node down on that family tree, that's me. Slowly fading out, but for now, part Mets fan, part Marlins fan as of March 2020, and by blood, part Sox fan. I'm the most mixed white guy on this family tree. So for my dad's birthday, he's watching this video, so we'll just say it's his 40th so he doesn't dislike it. Major League Baseball got us tickets to Game 4 of the ALCS at Fenway Park. First pitch was scheduled for 8:08 p.m. Eastern. This was the first postseason game my dad or I had ever been to. If it couldn't be at Citi Field, the next best place was Fenway. But, as they say in Scary Movie,
but wait! There's more!
If going to our first playoff game wasn't special enough, we were asked to get to the stadium 3 hours before first pitch to go onto the field for batting practice.
Woo! Yeah, baby!
Being on a Major League Baseball field for the first time in my life for something as big as the ALCS is pretty much as surreal as it sounds. The closest I've come to this was last March when I got to sit in the dugout with the Marlins for an entire game. That was absolutely unreal, but that was spring training though. This was the playoffs.
The playoffs?
On the field with us are tons of cool people I know from all areas of the game. From Jeff Passan and Rajay Davis, to Raul Ibanez and Tom Verducci, to Reggie Jackson and Chaim Bloom. There are VIPs in every direction. It's funny because almost a year ago to the day I released Meet the Wilpons, in which I incorrectly pronounced Chaim's first name. Now here I am, a year later, standing with him on the field at the ALCS. And who said men can't change? I'm also meeting a few famous TikTokers from MLB's creator class, which is really awesome. Jackson Olsen, Trevor Fanstrom, and Baseball Dad, who are all much bigger than I am, are doing crazy things like this every day, but just for tonight, we're all getting the same treatment. I'd also like to mention that I'm standing out there with 2 teams worth of Major League Baseball players, and I'm still somehow the second tallest person on the field, behind Chris Sale. Wait, what is that? Is that whistling I hear? I'm just kidding. But as the great Harvard scholar Taylor Swift once said, it's time to go. Playoff baseball's about to start.
Circles it, glove, throws, and got him. What a play on both ends.
At this point of our trip, I had a few different video ideas to incorporate this experience into. and all of them were Red Sox themed. But as the game went on, my ideas started becoming less clear. You see, there was a second team on the field, one I hadn't really paid any attention to in a while. And then came the 8th inning.
There it goes to left. Altuve has tied it.
Stop. This was it. This was the point where I changed course. In each of Jose Altuve's first 3 at-bats that game, the crowd at Fenway repeatedly chanted 2 words at this once league-renowned star. The second this ball leaves the bat, I know where it's landing, and by judging how quickly the aforementioned raging crowd shut up, everybody else did too. In that same thought, I realized how freaking cool what just happened was. That entire series, I wasn't just rooting for the Red Sox, but against the Astros. But in the face of 38,000 screaming fans, the majority of whom were cursing his name as you just heard, one of the greatest postseason hitters of all time persevered through the noise and came through yet again. In doing so, he didn't just change that game, but the course of the entire series. And in that same moment, something hit me. It's more than a week later. I finally come down from the high of the playoff experience, only to replace it with the high of several pounds of freshly caught Swedish fish that even the calorie-counting fitness nut that I am can't resist. Candy in hand, I continue writing this video and think to myself, is this fish actually from Sweden? I also realize in that moment that I need to write better jokes. That night in Boston, after Jose Altuve changed the course of the championship series with his game-tying homer off of Adam Ottavino, that was the moment where I knew what I wanted the take-home theme of this project to be. Sure, this whole video is admittedly just a long-form way of showing off this incredible experience I was able to have and include you in that because, well, you got me here, but I really wanted to make this something other than just your typical vlog that acts as a bland recap of my experience. I went to Fenway with the hope of learning something, and from there, I could find a way to share what I learned with that kind of creative twist you guys know me for. And when Jose hit that ball over the green monster, I got what I came for. After the end of the 2019 season, after John Boy, The Athletic, and the following fallout of their sign-stealing scandal, I was one of the first people on the planet to see the Astros play in person. This was during the same spring training trip I mentioned earlier, in the same stadium I sat in the Marlins dugout, but just one day earlier. That was the first work trip I had ever been on, made possible by both the league and your support. My trip to Fenway is the second work trip I've ever been on, and the first time I've done anything like it since that spring training trip. I was there to see the Astros at the beginning of all this on the first trip, and recently I got to witness what I believe should be a defining moment in their fight to end all of this on the second. I always love finding weird symmetry in both my own life experiences and the general world around me. I'm always fascinated by it, and I think this coincidence is pretty cool. Now, I'm sure most people don't see this moment or this season as one that'll bring about any change in their view of this team. I'm not the average fan, and I'm not the average person, but this season and this moment have for me. The Astros were my favorite American League team pre-scandal. Post-scandal, they were the only team in baseball I hated. I don't get upset over division rivalries, I don't waste my time hating on or getting mad at the Yankees. It takes a hell of a lot for me to hate a person or another team in sports. I think it's just a waste of time, and it's usually only ever for moral or ethical reasons. So before I talk about what I want to talk about next, I really wanted to take a brief moment to highlight the fact that I truly hated Houston for what they did. The Astros impressed in the shortened season last year, but it didn't really seem all that significant to me with there being no fans in the stands to boo them, as we all believe they deserved. In their first full season since, playing in front of 81 real road crowds, without Garrett Cole, George Springer, and Justin Verlander, they put their heads down and still found their way back into the World Series. Emotions aside, if you don't see anything in that, I think that's on you, because that's pretty incredible. Yes, you can leave your dislike on the video now. It's nice that for the first time in a couple years, the first thing I feel when I hear their name isn't resentment. I'm still upset with them for doing what they did in the first place, sure, regardless of who else was cheating, but they have gained back my respect. In the face of all the booing and the cursing and the death threats, they shut their mouth and played great baseball. And after not really paying attention to them for the entire season, it took my experience at the ALCS to really appreciate that. As soon as the ball left Altuve's bat on the first pitch of the 8th inning, in spite of tens of thousands of screaming fans cursing his name. Now, like I said, this video was mostly made to showcase my first playoff experience. But even though that's true, nothing I've said in this video is exaggerated or over-dramatized. Everything I've described here is exactly the way I experience things. I would never in a million years post a video where my true feelings on a sports topic I'm covering were being manipulated by some larger force, and that applies to Major League Baseball as well. And I couldn't talk to you about the trip without sharing something I learned from it. Through my experience, I was able to finally move on from my corrosive resentment of the Houston Astros. Something I enjoy as a creator is the meta-commentary that only I really know about when I go back and watch my videos in the future. Sometimes the things I talk about in videos have double meanings and apply to things going on in my own life, and this lesson I took home with me from Boston, and the same one I'm relaying to you now, is one of those things. It does apply to things going on in my own life right now. Admittedly, I wrote this video with the hope that they'd come back and win the World Series, and even though it would have made this message hit a little better, I'm sure, nothing I've said so far has changed. The Braves were really deserving of a title here, and I'm really happy for a lot of the players and coaches on that roster. Most of you are still upset about 2017, and I honestly wouldn't blame you if you were. But if you can set that hate aside, what the Astros have done this year is objectively something to admire, and while their season may not be enough for them to gain your admiration, it should, in my opinion, be enough to gain some degree of respect back. Thank you from the bottom of my heart to Major League Baseball and for everybody who supported me over the last few years, for making this experience possible, and for allowing me to share my feelings on baseball to a large audience every single day. I can't wait to see what comes next.